everybody. Welcome to Optimized for Humans, a podcast that's focused on how we can make the most of human potential within our organizations and strategically leverage AI to do all of the rest. My name is Usha. I'm an executive coach and consultant, and I support leaders in building high-performing, human-centered organizations. And today, I'm really happy to be speaking with Scott Brinker. Scott is the editor of chiefmartech.com, followed by over 80,000 marketers. He's formerly the VP of Platform Ecosystem at HubSpot, where he's led strategy for the company's global technology partners. He's also created the marketing technology landscape. He's launched the MarTech conference, wrote a best-selling book, Hacking Marketing, and Ad Age has even called him the godfather of MarTech. And Scott, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and really explore what is the role of AI in a marketing context? What is this sort of intersection of marketing and technology, and where do you see the kind of genius that the marketing teams and the humans in the marketing teams bring to the table, and the genius that we can outsource to the artificial intelligence? And I guess my first question, well, actually, welcome, first of all. Anything you'd
Thank
like
you
to
for
share
having me.
Thrilled to be having this conversation with you. And I guess we'll start with this first question of where do you see AI playing a role in the marketing context? And where do you see the kind of unique genius of marketing teams?
Yeah. Well, I would say there are three ways in which we're seeing AI, and sort of three areas in which we're seeing AI change the nature of marketing and how marketing teams run. The first is all these AI tools and agents to help marketers with the production of their actual work. Certainly with generative AI, we've seen a lot of great tools helping marketers with their content production needs. But there's also other cool tools of helping marketers be able to analyze data more easily. They don't necessarily have to wait for a dedicated data analyst. More and more of these AI tools can help answer these questions for them. So bunch of great tools there to accelerate the production of marketing. Then you've got these tools that are customer facing. These are tools that we're increasingly using for everything from kind of the interactive chatbots on websites to answer questions automatically. I mean, historically, those things always kind of sucked. But actually now with, these generative AI LLM engines, they're actually getting quite good, particularly if companies are hooking them up to good data sources on their end. You also have AI that's doing things like, crafting custom emails for people and whatnot. And then the third kind of AI that is perhaps the most interesting, but also the most challenging for marketers, is we're starting to see AI that is being used by the buyers for how they find and engage with folks that they might be buying from. Yeah, and the closest example of this would be obviously in the, many decades here, we've had the Google bot. So the whole practice of SEO for marketers was okay, how do we engage Google so that then when customers are engaging Google, they engage with us? Now we're starting to see this explosion of many different kinds of AI tools and AI engines, obviously ChatGPT, Claude, things like that, that marketers also have to think about how they show up and engage with those agents as a way to reach their customers. So between all these things, there's a lot going on in AI and marketing.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't even thought about the piece of now SEO, or there's more channels through which a potential customer can reach you. It's actually not just Google anymore, which is an interesting and kind of new game, and a wider aperture to think about this.
Yeah, and it's not just about appearing in these AI answer engines the way we appeared in Google. It's now that some of these AI tools can actually serve as an agent. That I can tell the AI, hey, can you go and check what the best deal is for a set of, hotel options when I go to Dallas, and it will go off and it'll research it, and then I can have it go ahead and book the tickets for me. And so you start thinking about these things where it's these AI agents acting as these intermediaries on behalf of our buyers. It's challenging because as marketers, we have to both market to humans, but we also increasingly now have to market to their agents as well.
Right. And traditionally, the agents you've dealt with were also human, and now it's a whole other game.
It's going to be
What
an
do you
interesting, yes, decade ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of appreciating the complexity that all of this introduces for marketers and marketing teams to be thinking about, like how things go out into the world. And I'm curious, what do you see as sort of some of the more deeply human skills that, marketers bring to the table, the human marketers bring to the table that we should be mindful about and kind of doubling down on and creating more space for the marketers to be doing more of?
Yeah, I mean, there is still a tremendous amount of this that absolutely needs to be human. The
Mm,
core spark of the creative in marketing is very human. The actually understanding our customers is still something we can use these AI tools to help give us different perspective, but it's
yeah.
ultimately the marketer who needs to synthesize that. And one of the best ways for marketers to take advantage of these AI tools is if the AI is helping them do more of their work and be more efficient on some of the
Yeah.
slog work that marketing often required, to take some of that time and spend more of that time actually talking directly with human customers.
Yeah.
In like a call or a video conference is fine, but actually even getting out into the world and meeting customers face to face, because it's
Yeah.
that sort of understanding and intuition of who the
Yeah.
customer is and the empathy that you develop for them. It's just so crucial, to like really driving a strategy and a brand.
Yeah.
And that's something AI isn't going to replace anytime soon.
No, and if you think about like, like from a customer perspective, so much of ads are often like they're meant to create an emotion, right? They're meant to be evoking something deeper, something more subconscious. It's not just here's our product, here's everything it can do for you. It's there's a line that I once heard. I'm not going to remember the source, but someone once said, one line that summarizes what marketing is like good marketing is people like us do things like this. It's like
Mm.
that's what you're trying to evoke in a customer is people like us do things like this, and a product is sort of part of that. And that's such a deeply emotional thing. And there's something about like how do we free up the humans to have more space to discover that by interacting with the customers directly, and also encapsulate that in a myriad of ways, towards a myriad of customers who will, a lot of different people who may, do a lot of different things.
Yeah. It's like there's all these great AI tools that can help us accelerate the way
Yeah.
in which we're collecting that insight and analyzing it. But at the end of the day, the empathy and the true insight comes from a human. And it's also worth
Mm,
keeping in mind while like AI has become very good at, executing or accelerating individual tasks,
mhm,
marketing overall is a very complex machinery, and it's
mm,
really important about how these things are connected together and orchestrated together. And again, that's something right now that, having humans, certainly at the highest level in marketing, like a CMO or VP of marketing, having the big picture of how all these pieces fit together. But
yeah.
depending on the size of your organization, if you have someone who's running your marketing operations or your marketing technology, they're the ones who are putting the guardrails around this. They're the ones who are thinking about the orchestration across these different, tasks and interactions. And so these are all things that are just still very, very human centric in how they
Mm.
get run today.
What do you think are some capabilities or skills that are going to be just increasingly more like new capabilities and skills that you'd want marketers and marketing teams, as well as the leaders who are overseeing this engine to cultivate?
Well, I think one of the things that's very exciting is, so as you mentioned in the intro, I've been looking at these marketing technology products for many, many
Mhm,
years. There's a lot of them. And most people, they talk about like a MarTech stack, like, oh,
mhm,
what are the different tools that we use to execute and run our marketing? Um, Most of those tools to date have been commercial products that you buy or you subscribe to as SaaS or whatnot. And there's still going to be plenty of that. The death of SaaS is, highly overrated at this point. But
Hmm.
we are starting to see these AI tools that make it easier and easier for us to create custom applications or custom
Mm,
automations or even custom little AI agents. This is incredibly powerful for us to be able to tailor both how we run our marketing organization internally, but also what are the customer facing experiences that we put out on our website or in our mobile app or things like that.
mhm,
And it's incredibly powerful now. Some of these like no code or, sort of the groovy thing that people talk about these days is vibe coding.
mhm.
We'll see if that phrase sticks around or not. But this idea of like people who are not dedicated software engineers are
Yeah,
able to use these tools to create more and more like specialized software for their particular need or their particular customer experience.
right.
That being said, this still takes skills. And
Hmm.
so I think it's something that, for marketers and certainly as a CMO thinking about developing the talent and the skill set within their organization, I think
Hmm.
learning to be able to do those little more customized apps and agents and automations
Hmm.
and do them well, I think it's going to be an incredibly useful skill.
Yeah, it's interesting. That also kind of takes me back to what you were saying earlier about creating more space for the marketers to go speak with the customers directly. And there's almost this like, how do you become more adaptive to use all of these different tools and customize these tools to the experience you want to create for the end user? And also, how are you getting that data about what the end user and the customer actually wants? And there's something about like, it almost seems like now there's more of the runway for marketing teams to be paying attention to of like what happens in each of these stages and how do we tailor that in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. And what do you think from a technology perspective? What would you say are like, how ready do you think organizations are from a technology perspective and having the knowledge to really leverage AI? And what would you recommend in becoming more ready?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because there's certainly technical capabilities that need to be developed. Probably
Mhm.
the most important one is most companies need to get better at managing their data. Um, and this is a
Of
story as
course.
old as time,
Yeah.
but in the case of AI, it's just become even more important because so many of these AI engines and AI models the AI itself actually has almost become a commodity. Like anybody
Mm.
can get it, and it's a very general purpose
Mm.
technology. What makes the difference from one company to another is entirely like the data, or sometimes they call it now the context. Like, what's the context
Mhm.
that you pass into that engine, for it to then be able to execute. And so this is entirely a function of like, okay, are we collecting the right data? Are we managing it well? Can we identify it well? Can we get it to the right place at the right time? Do we maintain it over time so it doesn't just degrade in quality as data does naturally over time?
Of
And this is
course.
a lot of work, but it's the sort of work that, in a digital world, now in an AI powered
Yeah.
digital world, it's just an incredibly powerful capability, incredibly important capability for companies to master. And the CMO doesn't have to do this on their own. This is a
Yeah.
company-wide mission. Very often, like a
Totally.
CIO or chief data officer, someone like that. Those teams, those are great partners with
Yeah.
the marketing organization on that. But that's probably the most important technological piece to like keep developing.
Yeah, and there's something in there too I'm wondering about, which is like the capability across the teams to sort of manage data, navigate data, et cetera, because actually now it's becoming more distributed, right? You don't just get like the one report. Now you can actually just go search it for yourself. You can explore these databases yourself, and that's becoming more and more part of the job of understand your customer. Here's like all of these data sources through which you can do that, in addition to going out yourself. And there's something about like there's a question I have around like, what are the skills you think each individual in the organization kind of, what's the watered down version of that like
Mm.
I would have to, as just like a marketing analyst, be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, even though all right, so there's a lot more data and it's becoming a lot more accessible to
Yeah,
marketers, which is a wonderful thing, and there's a
totally.
lot of these AI tools that can increasingly help marketers answer questions with that data or use that data. But I think it's still really important for marketers to be data savvy. That doesn't
Mm,
mean like they need to, go get a degree in statistics. It doesn't necessarily mean they need to go learn how to do SQL queries or things like that. But they need to, have enough data literacy and enough sort of, even like basic statistical literacy that these AIs aren't perfect. I mean, the AI engines themselves,
yeah,
depending on context, can have things where they hallucinate or they, make the wrong inference
absolutely.
and give the wrong answer. You also have the case that the data that you're using, while we were talking about how important it is to make that data high quality, the truth is for a lot of companies, not all the data is always high quality. And so, depending on the data that you're using, it might not be giving you the right answers. And so, like, for
Mm,
marketers who are using these tools to just develop enough data sense that they can
mhm.
sort of pass the sniff test on, like, oh, wait a second, that doesn't seem quite right. Or,
Yeah.
explain to me, like, what was the logic behind this? I think that just sort of questioning, of the data to provide a sanity check to it versus just like, yeah, but the AI just told me X, so I guess it must be X.
Yeah.
The good marketers will be sort of questioning everything they see.
Yeah, and one of the things I love about marketing teams is their willingness to test and learn and experiment. And there's this premise that, like the customer knows best. So you're putting forward your best hypotheses and you're actually getting data on like, well, how does that actually match up in a good marketing team anyway, which I think,
Yeah,
and this does seem like best practice. Where it's like, okay, what of all of these ideas that we have, what is the customer gravitating towards before you ever go into like producing the product, etc., right? And that there's something about that kind of inherent agility and like that test and learn mindset that I think is going to be really meaningful in this capacity as well, because everything, even in the interaction with the data and the AI, et cetera, like you're trying to create better and better experiments rather than having this be now the new source of truth or direction, which I think will be incredibly meaningful for the organization.
yeah,
And
no, I'm so glad you said that. I've long been an advocate for experimentation and marketing. A company I
yeah.
built many years ago was all about tools to help marketers do more experiments. And the thing that
Mm,
makes me so excited about AI and this sort of acceleration of production and analysis and all this is for
yeah.
marketers who lean into this, it actually expands the bandwidth they have to run more and more experiments and accelerate that learning in, as you say, a more agile way. Um, but it's interesting because even though the tools make that more and more possible, in order to actually do it, it really does require a mind shift, a mindset shift. It requires a culture, within the
Yeah.
marketing organization, the company to say, like, experimentation is good. Because
Yeah.
there's always that caveat there that the nature of experimentation is you're going to try things. A number of the things you're going to try are not going to work. And that's actually a good thing because that's how you're learning. Like, okay, that thing didn't work. Let's try this other thing. Or this kind of work.
Right.
Let's iterate it. Let's do this,
Right.
but that requires a culture that actually embraces that sort of like rapid iteration. It's okay to try things and have them not work. Just you learn from that. You try something else. Um, it's funny, like we talk about this a lot, but
Mm,
there's so many companies that I've engaged with where
mm,
even if they sort of say that, there's still this sort of cultural risk of like, well, yeah, we want you to experiment, but you should probably generally do things that are going to work. And you're like, okay, well, now all of a sudden people get like very conservative in like, okay, well, I'm only
Yeah,
going to really try something if I'm pretty sure it is going to work. And that cuts off
yeah.
so much opportunity for innovation.
And and I think that's becoming more that the need to experiment, the need to be agile, the need to like respond quickly is it's always been important, but I just think it's like accelerating in
Yeah.
how crucial it is because of the disruption and the pace of change that you're working with, right? Because yeah, I mean, there's so many elements in there, in the why of that, but in part, like AI makes so many things more accessible. So I think like there's more space for competition, there's more space for different smaller brands to like come out and try a whole bunch of things that previously it might have required a big engine to like really help and support, right? Like if I wanted to launch a product tomorrow, maybe not tomorrow, but if I wanted to launch a product, previously it was like, well, I'd have to work with a designer, I would have to do this, I have to do that. Now it's becoming a lot more democratized of like, well, I can try a bunch of designs on AI. I can try a bunch of like, I can get a lot of ideas from AI. And there's all of these ways in which, and I think that democratization is amazing, but I think large organizations that are bogged down by bureaucracy are going to be facing death if they don't keep up with it.
No, totally. In fact, it's funny. So I've recently been doing, so I do a lot of speaking engagements,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the themes I've been talking about more lately is this idea of like, everyone can be a creator, inside your
Yeah.
organization.
And, I think part of that is just sort of we're still, there's a lot of muscles to still develop, right? Around setting really good guardrails, having checkpoints, like really creating experiments that are safe to try. And how do you determine whether, like what to iterate, what to evolve, or what to kill? Like there's there's different mindsets and muscles that are required to have that be more effective that I think we're still that a lot of like large organizations in particular, I think that's not necessarily a well-used muscle. And I can understand the kind of, particularly from a decision maker perspective, how scary that might feel and look like. And I think it's like the creative power of people is the biggest asset every single organization, and especially for marketing teams that are interfacing with your customer on a more regular basis than like an IT team would, as a random example, yeah, and it's a real shame that there's still that kind of response to it, and I think it's really time to start to shift that.
Yeah. And again, it's a distribution. So I,
Yeah,
was giving one example of someone, shall we say, on the laggard side,
yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah,
adoption.
yeah, of course.
There are certainly others that are leaning into it, and
Yeah,
I think the reality is they're going to have a competitive advantage.
yeah,
In some ways, it's almost like an arbitrage of, these capabilities now exist in the world, and those
yeah,
folks who are comfortable yeah, leaning into that and taking some risk and experimenting with it are going to be the
yeah.
ones that harness a lot of the early wins from that, and good for them.
Yeah, and just the wisdom of like the user experience. I've been working with a marketing team that's trying to innovate, and one of the things that I've really noticed, and this is a product that every household will use, and one of the things that I really noticed is like the richness of the conversation when we're just sharing our experiences as like a consumer of this product, and there's so much information in that, certainly not to restrict, where you pull the data to just that, but there's something about like how do we creatively empower people to bring some of those tensions they may have to the table, whether it's with your organization or with the product, whatever, and how do we harness that into productive constructive change that I think is
Mm.
it's an untapped opportunity in some places.
I
The
agree.
what I'd love to hear from you. What do you think are some like cultural shifts? I think we're kind of moving towards this and speaking towards this, but what do you think are some cultural shifts that will be really meaningful and important as AI start to disrupt the workplace more and more?
Yeah, well, I think it's this, the big one is exactly what we've been talking about here, which is, these AI tools are essentially empowering individuals more and more. And that's a wonderful thing. But a lot of organizations, actually, for many of the roles, particularly low and mid-level roles, they were actually relatively constrained. Okay, well, if you want to do this, you get approval here, and then you're going to file a ticket there, and then these
Yeah,
three people might build it 3 months later, and then and it's not to say that governance isn't good. There is still absolutely a need for governance. I mean, we have to be careful with data. We have to,
hmm,
respect, privacy of customers. There's regulations. There's compliance. There's lots of good things we still need governance. But even now, given some of these tools that let us empower individuals while still having good guardrails around them, that's just such a net new way of operating. So there's that, like, empowering people that way is a
mm,
cultural shift. I mean, there's process, but it's a cultural shift at its heart. And then the
yeah,
second thing on top of
absolutely.
that is, then once you empower them,
Yeah,
leaning into that mode of encouraging experimentation,
yeah,
being okay with the sort of fast failure of things, out of which you find the wins, and really
yeah,
celebrating that, really making heroes out of the people who are constantly, trying things and, like, pushing, the boundaries. And
yeah,
it's just, again, this is almost one of these things where, like, when you talk to, like, say, early stage startups, like, this is how
yeah,
they operate, right? I mean, they're just,
absolutely.
it's one of the things that makes that stage of a company's existence, yeah, magical. Just the pace of innovation,
Absolutely.
sort of everyone, really having a stake in that.
Yeah,
For large organizations, they've got so many assets. They've got, like, I mean, generally they've got a larger set of money than most
yeah,
startups. They've got existing customers. They've got all this, like, market recognition moment. They've got all these incredible assets. To the degree that they can start to plug into that and integrate into that a bit of that, like, entrepreneurial startup, like, oh, but we can also actually empower more and more people within the org, to be co-innovating the evolution of the
yeah.
business. Um, Huge opportunity, but it is just a massive cultural shift.
Yeah, and I really believe in the power of large organizations to be able to do that. I think it requires lots of scaffolding and support and a fundamentally new way of thinking about the role of the people in the organization of actually being creators and innovators, and and how you might strategically use AI to do all of the kind of like admin and like just cogs in the wheel piece, and really building this partnership between the two to have more innovation and to drive growth in a meaningful way. So I think there's a lot of potential, and like I just if you know I'm sad for organizations that are missing that moment right now. you
Well, hopefully
well
a few of them
for
are listening in on this conversation, and yeah, the
yeah
synapses
I
start to fire.
Exactly. I would say this would probably be our sort of advice for any senior leader watching right now. Like, there's a huge opportunity here to reimagine what people can do, and the role of people. And I love what you've said about like, like people as creators, like every single person in this organization has the impact of being a creator, and what might you unlock if you can strategically leverage them as that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great thing for everyone. I mean, it's certainly great for a company if it can, like, have more innovation, particularly in an environment,
Yeah.
as you were saying, where things are
Yeah.
just constantly changing. They're not standing
Yeah.
still. So, if you don't
Yeah.
have these mechanisms to sort of keep evolving at the pace, at which technology and the market is evolving, yeah, you're falling behind. It's good for customers, when those innovations actually translate into, better experiences or better benefits for them.
Yeah,
But it's also a win for like the individuals themselves as well too. I mean,
absolutely.
people people can get a lot of satisfaction out of feeling like, okay, their job isn't just a certain set of like, rote mechanics on these things, but increasingly they have agency, they have
Mm.
this ability to like shape, both their work and their experience, but the impact that it has on others. Again, that's not necessarily going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think
Yeah,
actually a lot of people, given the opportunity, given the capabilities to do that, would just find it incredibly fulfilling. And so I'm excited that we seem to be in a direction we will get more and more of that. It just
yeah,
takes time.
yeah, absolutely. Scott, thank you so much for having this conversation. It's been so insightful to have your perspective. And again, I really have loved digging into sort of the marketing side of this and to dive deeper into this particular piece of the puzzle and how we might reimagine that. So, thank you so much for joining me today.
Usha, thank you so much for having me as your guest.